the Kajaki Dam incident. Armed combat is among the most traumatic, frightening, and horrific experiences that a person would ever have to encounter. In spite of the deadly situations in which soldiers are placed, some remarkable individuals overcome the terrible conditions and perform feats of bravery in the service of their country and for their comrades. Regardless of these acts of heroism, they sometimes are hampered by poor decision-making and a lack of foresight by their leadership. On September 6, 2006, members of the UK's 3rd Battalion Parachute Regiment were stationed in the area of the Kajaki Dam, located in Afghanistan's Helmand province. The dam was built in the 1950s and was later outfitted with hydroelectric generators, providing electricity for the local region. The area was a known bastion for Taliban operations in the province. Operating out of a pair of lookout posts codenamed Athena and Normandy, the men posted there were tasked with monitoring Taliban movements in the volatile region. On that day, spotters at the Normandy post noticed a group of armed men setting up a checkpoint at a nearby village. The interpreter that was assigned to the group stated that the village loudspeaker, usually used for the ritual call to prayer, was being repurposed by the Taliban to incite the locals to attack the British outpost. Lance Corporal Stuart Hale, a designated sniper, suggested that he engage the insurgents at long range with his rifle, something that his immediate superior, Corporal Stu Pearson, agreed to. Joined by Fusilier Dean Farrell and Private Chris Harvey for protection, Hale maneuvered closer for a clear shot. As he made his way to a suitable location, Hale leapt over a dry creek bed. When his boots hit the ground, he heard an explosion. Looking down, he saw he was missing a finger and part of his right leg. The impact of his landing had triggered a Soviet-era anti-personnel landmine. I initially thought that I just slipped, he recalls, and then it dawned on me what had happened. Hearing the explosion, Corporal Mark Wright and 8 other men, which included medics and stretcher bearers, made their way to Hale's location. A safe path was made and medical attention was given to him, including morphine and a tourniquet on his wounded leg. A medevac helicopter was called and the men waited for its arrival. It was at this point that a bad day suddenly got a lot worse. During the wait, Stu Pearson, trying to get comfortable, lost his footing and set off another mine. While the dust from this latest explosion was still settling, the horrible realization hit the men. They were standing in the middle of an uncleared minefield left over from the Soviet occupation of the country in the 1980s. And one unlucky move could trigger more of the deadly devices. Unable to be reached by his comrades, Pearson applied a tourniquet to himself and injected morphine to ease the pain as they waited for the rescue chopper. The men had called for a helicopter equipped with a winch system. This way the wounded soldier can be loaded onto the medevac while limiting the downdraft of the rotor blades, which could set off other mines, while also keeping the aircraft out of range of any subsequent blasts. Ideally, the helicopter would be in the form of a UH-60 Black Hawk, a multi-role aircraft that has a relatively light downdraft. Unfortunately, the only Black Hawks available in the area were in use by nearby American forces and were busy on other missions. Instead of the lightweight specialist helicopter, the medevac came in the form of a large British CH-47 Chinook. This twin-rotored aircraft fulfills multiple roles, but is most often used to haul heavy cargo and has the raw power to lift 2 Humvees. It can also be used for troop transport or medevac missions, able to hold 33 fully equipped soldiers or hold stretchers for 26 wounded. The Chinook came in for a landing. As it lacked the winch gear to haul the wounded men to safety, the men frantically tried to wave the giant helicopter away, lest the immense downdraft trigger more mines. Eventually, the pilot noticed the men's warning and flew away from the clustered groups, but it was too late. The wind produced by the powerful twin rotors shifted rocks and boulders, which set off another mine near Wright and the others tending to Stuart Hale. The resulting explosion sent pieces of shrapnel into Wright's chest, face, arms, and neck. Medic Alex Craig was hit by the blast, and Stu Pearson received further damage to his injured leg. Craig managed to clear the area, but Wright was too badly injured to move. The remaining medic, Paul Hartley, devised an ingenious plan to reach his wounded comrades. He would throw his medical bag to the ground. If the force of the impact didn't detonate a mine, he would leap to that spot, repeating the process over and over again, playing a deadly game of leapfrog to cover the 30 meters between him and his wounded companions. In spite of his life-threatening injuries, Wright continued to issue commands to his men, shouting encouragement to them and doing what he could to keep control of the rapidly deteriorating situation, even as he continued to bleed out. "I just wanted to close my eyes, but Mark wouldn't let anyone fall asleep. He kept shouting at us," Pearson recalled. Although Mark was badly injured, he still kept us in touch with what was going on, with the information he was being given. He relayed to the men that the American Black Hawk helicopters had been made available and were on their way with proper winch equipment, but they were coming from distant Kandahar, over an hour away. Just as the terrible situation was stabilized, there was yet another explosion. Someone had tossed a water bottle to Fusilier Andrew Barlow, who lost his footing and detonated a fourth mine. The resulting blast blew off the lower portion of his left leg, and fragments struck Private David Prosser, as well as Wright, who was further injured by the shrapnel. Sometime later, a pair of Blackhawks arrived and were able to lift the men without further incident. They were transferred onto waiting British Chinooks outside of the minefield, which took the men to a field hospital. Though still conscious, when he was loaded onto the helicopter, the numerous injuries were too much for Wright. In spite of the efforts of the medical crew, Mark Wright succumbed to his wounds while in transit. The entire incident from the first explosion to the arrival of the Blackhawks had lasted for 4 hours. In all, 7 British soldiers had been hit by the Soviet-era mines. Mark Wright was killed, and 3 men would lose limbs. For his bravery and devotion to duty under extraordinary circumstances, Wright would be posthumously awarded the George Cross. For their actions, Lance Corporal Paul Hartley and Fusilier Andrew Barlow would both be awarded George Medals, and Stuart Patterson would be awarded the Queen's Medal. In the wake of this incident, an inquiry was called to investigate the failures that led to the tragedy. Coroner Andrew Walker condemned British military chiefs for sending troops into combat without the proper equipment. That a brave soldier is lost in battle is always a matter of deep sadness, but when that life is lost where it need not have been because of a lack of equipment and assets, those responsible should hang their heads in shame, Walker would say about the incident. A military inquest into the incident placed the blame on the High Command for not giving its soldiers the proper equipment and being forced to rely on the Americans for minefield extractions. Had suitable equipment been available, Wright's injuries may not have been fatal, the inquest concluded. 5 of the wounded men would sue the British Ministry of Defense for negligence, blaming the excessive casualties on the unavailability of winch-equipped helicopters, a necessity for extracting soldiers from minefields. Also mentioned in the lawsuit was the failure to provide maps of the area's minefields, though these were readily available, as well as communication breakdowns due to radio failures. The compensation would be settled out of court for an undisclosed 7-figure settlement. The lawyer representing Wright's family during the case stated, quote, "There has clearly been a really serious systemic failure to provide suitable training, intelligence, and resources," end quote. In the wake of this incident, major changes were implemented, and all British helicopters operating in Afghanistan would be fitted with the proper winch equipment in order to prevent a repeat of the tragedy. The events of the Kajaki Dam incident were the basis of the 2014 movie Kajaki, which dramatized the events on that fateful day.